The wreckage. The Martian dust storm had finally settled, leaving everything in the outpost coated in a fine layer of rusty powder. Elias Reeves wiped his goggles clean and surveyed the damage to the solar array. This was the third storm this month, unusual for this time in the Martian year, and he was getting tired of the constant repairs. "Elias, how bad is it?" The voice of Commander Walsh crackled through his helmet comm. "Same as last time. 5 panels completely shot, linkage torn on the east wing. I can have it running at 70% by nightfall," he replied, already calculating which spare parts he'd need to cannibalize. "Make it 80. The science team needs full power for their experiments." Elias bit back a sigh. "I'll see what I can do." At 32, Elias had spent the last 5 years as the head mechanic for Outpost Ares, one of humanity's first permanent research stations on Mars. Before that, he'd been the go-to repair specialist on Luna Base. He had a reputation for making impossible fixes with limited resources, which was why they'd recruited him for Mars duty in the first place. What they hadn't told him was that his prestigious position would mainly involve fighting a losing battle against the planet's harsh environment with increasingly outdated equipment. The latest shipment of replacement parts was 3 months overdue, and Earth Command seemed to think he could perform miracles indefinitely. As he trudged back to the maintenance shed, something caught his eye in the western sky. A bright streak that definitely wasn't a meteor. It grew larger by the second, trailing fire and smoke. "Command, we have an incoming object, bearing 270, moving fast," he reported, switching his visor to telescopic mode. "We see it. Radar shows it's slowing down. That's not natural orbital decay." Elias zoomed in further. "It's a ship, not one of ours." The realization hit the entire outpost like an electric shock. In the 27 years since humans had established their first outposts beyond Earth, there had never been a confirmed encounter with extraterrestrial intelligence. There had been anomalous signals, unexplained phenomena, but nothing concrete, until now. The vessel, sleek, asymmetrical, and unlike any human design, crashed into the Martian surface about 3 kilometers from the outpost. Despite Commander Walsh's orders to wait for the security team, Elias grabbed an emergency kit and hopped onto one of the outpost's rovers. "I'm the closest, and if there are survivors, they might need immediate help," he explained, already speeding toward the crash site. The wreckage was still smoldering when he arrived. The ship had carved a half-kilometer trench into the Martian soil before coming to rest against a rocky outcropping. Its hull was made of a material that seemed to shimmer between solid and liquid states, rippling like water where it had been breached. Elias approached cautiously, his heart pounding against his ribs. He'd prepared his whole life to fix machines, not to make first contact with an alien civilization. Yet here he was, the first human to reach what was clearly an advanced spacecraft of non-human origin. A section of the hull shifted, and what appeared to be a hatch slid open. Elias froze, his breath catching in his throat as a figure emerged, stumbling down the makeshift ramp. The alien was roughly humanoid, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, but that's where the similarities ended. Its skin was a pale blue that seemed to reflect light in patterns that shifted with its movements. It had no visible nose, and its eyes were large, pupil-less orbs that gleamed like opals. The alien took 2 steps forward before collapsing onto the Martian soil. Elias hesitated only briefly before rushing to the fallen figure. His medical training was basic, but he could see that the alien was injured, a viscous silver fluid seeping from several wounds. The alien's eyes fixed on him, and Elias was startled to see intelligence and fear reflected there. The creature raised a 7-fingered hand, palm outward, in what seemed like a universal gesture of peace. Then it spoke, not in any human language, but in a series of melodic clicks and hums that somehow conveyed meaning directly to Elias's mind. "Help. Danger coming. Not much time." By the time the security team arrived, Elias had moved the alien into the rover and stabilized its most serious injuries with his emergency medical kit. The alien, which had identified itself as Kuriza, had managed to communicate that it was a diplomat from a species called the Nilari, and that it had come to warn humanity. Warn us about what? Commander Walsh demanded when they returned to the outpost. The alien had been placed in the medical bay, under guard and observation. Kuriza's response came as a series of mental impressions rather than words, images of massive ships, weapons that twisted the fabric of space itself, and a ruthless species that conquered and consumed entire worlds. The Scourge, as Kuriza's people called them, had already destroyed 3 inhabited planets in a neighboring star system and were now headed toward Sol. "How long do we have?" Walsh asked, her face pale. 2 of your Earth months, came the translated response. Maybe less. In the days that followed, Elias was assigned to work with Kuriza, partly because the alien seemed most comfortable with him, and partly because they needed someone to assess the crashed ship's technology. If the threat was real, any advantage they could gain from the alien's more advanced tech would be crucial. The problem was that the ship was badly damaged, and without understanding the principles behind its operation, repairs seemed impossible. Conventional tools and methods were useless on the shape-shifting hull and the crystalline components that powered the ship's systems. "I need to understand how it works," Elias told Kuriza, gesturing at a particularly complex mechanism that seemed to be part of the propulsion system. The alien placed its hand on Elias's helmet, and suddenly his mind was flooded with information. Technical schematics, operating principles, material compositions. It was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a fire hose. "Sorry," Kuriza communicated, pulling back. "Your mind. Different structure. We'll try simpler." They developed a system where Kuriza would share information in smaller bursts, and Elias would translate it into diagrams and notes that human engineers might understand. It was slow going, but gradually Elias began to grasp the fundamentals of Nilari technology. What he discovered both amazed and terrified him. The Nilari had developed ways to manipulate gravity and electromagnetic forces that made Earth's most advanced physics look like Stone Age technology. Their ships didn't just travel through space. They warped it, creating shortcuts that allowed for faster-than-light travel without violating Einstein's theories. Even more impressive was their defensive technology. The Nilari had created shields that could absorb and redirect energy, making them nearly impervious to conventional weapons. If the Scourge had overcome these defenses to destroy Nilari worlds, Earth's military stood no chance. "We need to adapt this technology quickly," Elias told Commander Walsh during a briefing. "If I can understand how their shields work, maybe we can modify our own defense systems." "That's assuming this isn't all an elaborate deception," said Colonel Harris, the military liaison who had arrived from Earth shortly after the crash. "For all we know, this diplomat could be an advanced scout for an invasion." Kuriza, who had been quietly observing, suddenly projected a vivid mental image of its homeworld, a beautiful blue-green planet with 3 moons, being systematically destroyed by massive black ships. The emotional impact of the memory hit everyone in the room like a physical blow. There was no faking the grief and horror contained in that vision. "I believe Kuriza," Elias said firmly. "And I think I can adapt some of their tech to our systems, but I'll need resources and authority to modify the outpost's defense grid." After hours of debate, Walsh gave Elias provisional approval to begin work, though Colonel Harris insisted on oversight for every step of the process. Earth Command was informed, but their response was cautious. They wanted more evidence before committing global resources to an alien threat that might not exist. For the next 3 weeks, Elias and Kuriza worked tirelessly. The alien's condition improved gradually, allowing it to assist more directly with the modifications. They cannibalized parts from a crashed ship, integrating them with the outpost's systems in ways that frequently violated engineering protocols but somehow worked. The breakthrough came when they successfully created a small-scale version of the Nilari shield technology. During a test, it completely neutralized a laser beam that should have cut through steel. "It works," Elias breathed, looking at Kuriza with a mixture of relief and awe. The alien's mental response carried a tinge of hope for the first time. Yes, but not strong enough. Need more power. Need bigger. Elias nodded grimly. Their prototype could protect a room, maybe even a small building, but scaling it up to shield an entire planet would require resources they didn't have. As if reading his thoughts, Kuriza projected another image, not of a planetary shield, but of multiple smaller shields strategically placed around key installations, linked together in a network that could be expanded over time. Start small, the alien suggested. Protect important places first. It was a practical approach, but implementation would require cooperation from Earth's various governments and military forces, cooperation that wasn't forthcoming. Despite increasingly urgent messages from Mars, Earth Command remained skeptical, unwilling to divert significant resources based on an unverified alien warning. Their skepticism evaporated 37 days after Kurza's arrival, when long-range sensors detected multiple large objects decelerating at the edge of the solar system. The scourge had arrived, weeks ahead of schedule. Earth erupted into panic as the news spread. Military forces worldwide went on high alert, and civilian populations in major cities began evacuating to rural areas. At Outpost Airs, Commander Walsh called an emergency meeting. Earth Command is scrambling to mount a defense, but they're working with conventional weapons against an enemy that's far beyond our technology level, she explained. They're asking if our shield technology is ready for deployment. Elias exchanged a look with Kuriza. It's not, he admitted. We've made progress, but scaling up would take months, not days. Is there anything we can do? Walsh asked, desperation evident in her voice. Elias hesitated, then turned to Kuriza. What about the ship's communication array? Could we modify it to interfere with their navigation systems? The alien's eyes widened slightly, an expression Elias had come to recognize as surprise. Possible, but dangerous. Could attract attention to Mars first. We're already a target, Colonel Harris interjected. Better to try something than sit here waiting for the end. For once, Elias agreed with the colonel. If we can disrupt their approach, it might buy Earth time to evacuate more people or find a weakness we can exploit. What Elias didn't say was that he had been working on another idea, one so audacious that he hadn't dared mention it even to Kuriza. Using principles he learned from the alien technology, he believed he could turn the outpost power plant into a gravity wave generator powerful enough to create a localized distortion in spacetime. Whether it would be enough to affect the scourge ships was another question entirely. As the meeting concluded and people dispersed to their assigned emergency stations, Elias pulled Kuriza aside. I have another idea, he said quietly, but I'm going to need your help, and we might have to break a few rules. The alien's mental response carried a mixture of curiosity and concern, more dangerous than communication array. Elias nodded grimly. Much more. But if it works, we might just save both our worlds. Kuriza studied him for a long moment, its opalescent eyes unreadable. Then it extended its hand in a very human gesture of agreement. Show me. The Alliance. Elias led Kuriza through the maintenance tunnels beneath the outpost, avoiding the security checkpoints that had been established since the aliens' arrival. The tunnels were cramped and poorly lit, designed for access to utility systems rather than comfortable passage. Are you sure about this? Kuriza's mental voice carried doubt and concern. Your commanders will not approve. That's why we're not asking permission, Elias replied, his voice echoing slightly in the narrow space. They're soldiers and scientists. They follow protocols. What we need right now is a mechanic's approach. They reached a heavy door marked Primary Power Distribution, authorized personnel only. Elias placed his palm on the scanner, and the door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Inside was the heart of Outpost Ares, a compact fusion reactor that powered everything from life support to communication systems. This was originally designed as a prototype for Earth's next-generation power grid, Elias explained as he began accessing the reactor's control systems. It's more advanced than anything else on Mars, which is why they put it here, far enough away that if something went wrong, the damage would be contained. Kirza moved closer to examine the reactor, its skin reflecting the blue glow of the monitoring screens. You intend to modify this energy source. Not just modify it, Elias said, pulling up schematics on a display. I'm going to completely repurpose it. Based on what you've shown me about how your ship manipulates gravity fields, I think we can convert this reactor into a gravity wave generator. The alien's eyes widened. Such technology requires precise calibration. One miscalculation could cause a catastrophic meltdown that would destroy the entire outpost. Elias finished for him. I know, but if those scourge ships reach Earth, billions die. The risk seems worth it. For the next 12 hours, they worked feverishly, bypassing safety protocols and rerouting power conduits. Elias had to improvise constantly, adapting Earth technology to incorporate principles that were centuries beyond human understanding. Meanwhile, updates from Earth grew increasingly grim. The Scourge fleet had accelerated, now projecting arrival within 48 hours. Attempts to communicate had failed, and preliminary scans suggested their weaponry far exceeded anything in Earth's arsenal. Elias, what's your status? Commander Walsh's voice came through his comm unit, startling him as he was deep in the reconfiguration of a power coupling. Making progress on the communication array modifications, he lied, exchanging the guilty look with Kirza. Should have something testable in a few hours. Make it faster. Earth Command is getting desperate. They're talking about launching nuclear strikes as soon as the Scourge enters lunar orbit. Elias winced. That won't work. From what Kirza has shown me, their shields would absorb the energy and potentially redirect it. They could turn our own weapons against us. There was a long pause before Walsh responded. I'll pass that along. But I don't know if they'll listen. Just hurry. As she signed off, Kirza projected a mental image of a massive ship, black as space itself, absorbing a nuclear blast and then redirecting the energy in a devastating counterattack. The image was so vivid that Elias had to steady himself against a console. That's happened before? He asked. Yes. My people tried similar weapons when they first encountered the Scourge. 3 of our cities were destroyed by our own defense systems. We learned quickly to use other methods. What methods eventually worked? The alien's mental response carried a deep sadness. None worked well enough. That is why I am here. To help you find a solution we could not. Elias felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like the Martian gravity he'd never quite gotten used to. He wasn't a weapons designer or a military tactician. He was just a mechanic who had spent his career fixing things that others had built. Now, somehow, he was tasked with creating something entirely new that might be humanity's only hope. Let me show you what I've been working on, he said, pulling up a simulation on his tablet. If we can generate a gravity wave of sufficient amplitude, we might be able to create a localized space-time distortion around their fleet. Kirza studied the simulation, its fingers moving across the screen with surprising dexterity. This would not destroy their ships. No, Elias agreed, but it could disrupt their navigation systems, maybe even damage their drives. At minimum, it would buy us time. The power requirements would be enormous. That's why we're repurposing the reactor. It's the only power source on Mars capable of generating the necessary output. The alien made an adjustment to the simulation parameters. With this configuration, you would need to channel the energy through a more focused medium. Your current design would dissipate too quickly. Elias frowned. We don't have anything that could handle that kind of focused power transmission. Kirza was silent for a moment, then projected an image of a component from its ship, a crystalline structure that pulsed with internal light. The navigation core from my vessel could serve as a focal point. It is designed to withstand and channel massive energy flows. But that would destroy your ship completely, Elias pointed out. You'd be stranded here permanently. The alien's mental voice was resolute. My mission was to help save your world. If this is the way, then the cost is acceptable. Hours later, they had integrated the Nilari navigation core into their makeshift gravity wave generator. The fusion reactor had been pushed well beyond its design capacity, coolant systems struggling to prevent a meltdown as they channeled its output through alien technology, never meant to interface with human systems. "We're ready for a test firing," Elias announced, wiping sweat from his brow. The temperature in the power distribution center had risen several degrees despite the environmental controls running at maximum. Just as he was about to initiate the test sequence, the door slid open, and Colonel Harris stepped in, flanked by 2 security officers with weapons drawn. "Step away from the controls, Reeves," Harris ordered, his voice cold. "You're in violation of at least 15 regulations. I'm shutting this operation down." Elias didn't move from the control panel. "With all due respect, Colonel, you don't understand what we're trying to do here." "I understand perfectly." Commander Walsh became suspicious when she couldn't find you at the communication array. "We've been monitoring your access codes. You've been tampering with the outpost's primary power system without authorization." "Because there isn't time for authorization," Elias protested. "The Scourge will reach Earth in less than 2 days. This might be our only chance to stop them." Harris gestured for the security officers to move forward. "Your alien friend has convinced you to sabotage our power supply, probably to leave us defenseless when the real attack comes." Kirza stepped forward, its skin pulsing with patterns that Elias had learned to recognize as distress. "No, we are trying to help. This mechanic has created something that could save your world." "Stand down, alien," Harris warned, his hand moving to his sidearm. "This isn't your decision to make." Elias looked from Harris to the control panel, calculating his options. He needed just a few minutes to initiate the test sequence. If it worked, the results would speak for themselves. "Colonel," he said carefully, "at least let us show you what we've built. If you still think it's too dangerous, we'll shut it down." Harris hesitated, then nodded curtly. 2 minutes. Explain." Elias quickly outlined their plan, showing Harris the simulations and the modifications they'd made. As he spoke, he surreptitiously activated parts of the sequence, bringing systems online gradually so as not to attract attention. "So you've turned our primary power supply into an untested weapon based on alien technology you barely understand," Harris summarized when Elias finished. "And if it fails, it could melt down and destroy the entire outpost." "Yes," Elias admitted, "but if it works, it could save billions of lives." Before Harris could respond, an alarm blared throughout the outpost. Commander Walsh's voice came over the comm system, tense and urgent. "All personnel, we have just received word from Earth Command. The Scourge fleet has accelerated again. Estimated arrival time is now 12 hours. Repeat, 12 hours. All non-essential operations are suspended. Report to emergency stations immediately." Harris's face paled. 12 hours? That's impossible. They were still beyond Jupiter's orbit. "Their technology is far beyond ours," Kirza reminded them. "They can manipulate space-time to shorten distances." The colonel looked at the alien, then at Elias, indecision clear in his expression. Finally, he holstered his weapon. "How soon can your device be ready?" "The test sequence is already running," Elias replied, turning back to the controls. "If everything checks out, we could be operational in 3 hours." Harris nodded. "Do it. I'll inform Commander Walsh. But if this goes wrong, Colonel, we'll all be too dead to worry about court-martials." After Harris left, Elias and Kirzo worked frantically to complete the final calibrations. The test results were promising. They had successfully generated a small gravity wave that briefly distorted local spacetime. Scaling it up to affect ships millions of kilometers away would require channeling the reactor's entire output through the Nilari navigation core, something that had never been attempted before. 2 hours before the Scourge's projected arrival, they were ready. Commander Walsh had evacuated all non-essential personnel to the emergency bunkers, leaving only a skeleton crew to operate critical systems. Elias stood before the control panel, his hands hovering over the activation sequence. Next to him, Kirz's skin rippled with complex patterns that seemed to reflect the gravity of the moment. "If this works," Elias said quietly, "what happens next? Do your people have a plan for defeating the Scourge permanently?" Kirz's mental response was tinged with uncertainty. "There are possibilities. Technologies we were developing before my world fell. Alliances with other species who also resist the Scourge. If we survive today, perhaps humans will join that resistance." Elias nodded, taking a deep breath. "Then let's make sure we survive." He initiated the sequence. The reactor hummed, its pitch rising as power output increased to maximum. The Nilari navigation core began to glow, first blue, then white-hot as it channeled energy beyond anything it had been designed to handle. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as safety systems detected the dangerous power levels and attempted to shut down the reactor. Elias bypassed them one by one, keeping the energy flowing through the modified conduits. "Core temperature critical," reported the automated system. "Containment failure imminent." "Just a little longer," Elias muttered, eyes fixed on the energy readings. "We need full saturation." The outpost's lights flickered as power was diverted to the gravity wave generator. In the command center, Walsh and Harris watched tensely as their systems struggled to maintain operation on backup power. "Navigation core saturation at 95%, Elias announced. "Initiating gravity wave in 3, 2, 1. He pressed the final control. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then a deep vibration shuddered through the outpost, a sound more felt than heard. On monitoring screens, they watched as a ripple spread outward from Mars, distorting the very fabric of space as it expanded toward the approaching fleet. "Did it work?" Walsh asked over the comm. Elias checked the readings, his heart sinking, wave intensity dropping faster than projected. "It might not be strong enough by the time it reaches them." Kirza placed a hand on the navigation core, its skin taking on the same glow as the crystal. Suddenly, the alien's body stiffened, and Elias felt a surge of mental energy, raw and powerful, as Kirza somehow connected directly with the core. The readings spiked dramatically. The gravity wave intensified, gaining strength rather than dissipating as it traveled outward. "What's happening?" Harris demanded. "It's Kirza," Elias replied, awestruck. "It's somehow amplifying the wave through some kind of mental connection with the core." On Earth's long-range sensors, operators watched in amazement as the approaching Scourge fleet suddenly slowed, their formation disrupted by an invisible force that twisted space around them. Several smaller vessels spun out of control, their navigation systems unable to compensate for the sudden spatial distortion. But the victory was short-lived. The largest ship, a behemoth that dwarfed all others, adjusted its approach, somehow adapting to the distortion. It continued toward Earth, now alone but still deadly enough to cause catastrophic damage. "One got through," Walsh reported grimly. "The big one." Elias looked at Kirza, who was still maintaining the connection with the navigation core. The alien's skin had lost its luster, becoming pale and translucent. Whatever it was doing was clearly taking a tremendous physical toll. "We need more power," Elias decided, overriding the reactor's final safety protocols. "Full output, no reserves." "Reeves, that's suicide," Harris protested. "You'll trigger a meltdown." "Only if we maintain it too long. We just need one more push." The reactor screamed as it pushed beyond its design limits, heat levels rising to near critical. The navigation core blazed white-hot, the metal around it beginning to warp and melt. Kirza's mental voice reached Elias, weaker than before but determined. "Direct. The wave. Not random. Focus on their drive systems." Understanding dawned on Elias. The Nilari weren't just telepathic with each other. They could communicate with their technology on some fundamental level. Through its connection with the navigation core, Curzon was trying to shape the gravity wave, focusing it precisely where it would do the most damage. Elias adjusted the controls, following the alien's guidance. "Tell me when," he said, his finger poised above the emergency shutdown switch. They would have seconds, maybe less, before the reactor went critical. In space, the gravity wave reformed, no longer a general distortion, but a concentrated pulse aimed directly at the remaining Scourge vessel. It struck with precision, targeting the ship's massive drive systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Scourge ship seemed to fold in on itself, caught in a localized space-time anomaly of its own making as its drives catastrophically failed. "Now," Curzon projected urgently. "Shut it down." Elias slammed the emergency shutdown, cutting power to the gravity wave generator. The reactor's warning sirens wailed as coolant systems struggled to bring temperatures back under control. On the monitoring screens, they watched as the Scourge ship imploded, collapsing into a brief, brilliant point of light before disappearing entirely, consumed by its own warped space-time field. In the silence that followed, Elias turned to Curzon. The alien had collapsed, its skin now almost transparent, internal lights flickering weakly. "Medic," Elias shouted into his comm. "We need emergency medical in the power distribution center now." Hours later, in the outpost's medical bay, Elias sat beside Curzon's recovery pod. The alien was stable but weakened, its systems slowly regenerating after the tremendous energy expenditure. Commander Walsh entered, followed by Colonel Harris. Both looked exhausted but relieved. "Earth Command sends their congratulations," Walsh said, "and their apologies for doubting the warning." Harris stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "I owe you both an apology as well. If I had succeeded in shutting you down." "Let's just be glad you didn't," Elias replied, too tired to hold a grudge. Walsh cleared her throat. "There's more. The remaining Scourge ships have retreated beyond our solar system. We don't know if they'll return, but we've bought ourselves time." And she paused, glancing at Curzon. "We've received transmissions from 3 other alien species who were monitoring the situation. Apparently, this is the first time anyone has successfully repelled a Scourge attack of this magnitude." Curzon's eyes opened slightly. "Others survived?" "Yes," Walsh confirmed. "They're calling for an alliance, a united front against the Scourge. Earth has been invited to join as a full member, thanks to what happened here today." Elias felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They hadn't just survived. They had changed the course of interstellar relations. Humanity's first official contact with alien life had ended not in conquest or submission, but in cooperation and mutual respect. As if reading his thoughts, Curzon's mental voice touched his mind. "Stronger now. Your people will bring something new to the Alliance. Something my people lacked." "What's that?" Elias asked. "The ability to see beyond established patterns, to create solutions where none existed before." The alien's hand reached out weakly, and Elias took it without hesitation. "Your species calls it thinking outside the box, I believe." Elias smiled. "Well, I'm just a mechanic. Improvising is part of the job description." "No," Curzon corrected gently. "You are more than that. You are the first of a new kind of diplomat, one who builds bridges not just between worlds, but between technologies and ideas." 3 weeks later, as Elias supervised the loading of equipment onto the transport that would take him and Curzon to Earth, he reflected on how much had changed. The outpost had been designated as the site for the first interspecies technological exchange program, with engineers and scientists from Earth and eventually other worlds coming to learn from each other. Curzon, now fully recovered, stood beside him, watching as humans and newly arrived alien representatives worked together to establish the foundations of what would become the Interstellar Defense Alliance. "Ready to meet my world?" Elias asked. The alien's mental response carried a mix of anticipation and contentment. "Our worlds," Elias Reeves. From today, they are bound together, not by fear or necessity, but by choice. As they boarded the transport, Elias couldn't help but smile at the irony. All his life, he had fixed machines that others had built. Now, he and an alien diplomat had helped build something far greater, a future where humanity would take its place among the stars not as conquerors or victims, but as equals in a community of worlds united against a common threat. The transport's engines hummed to life, and Earth beckoned in the distance, a blue jewel hanging in the void, saved by an unlikely alliance between a simple mechanic and a stranded alien diplomat who had found common ground when the stars aligned. New horizons. The transport ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, the friction heating its hull to a dull orange glow. Elias watched through the viewport as the clouds parted, revealing the sprawling metropolis of New Geneva, the headquarters of the United Earth government, since the climate wars had reshaped coastlines 2 decades earlier. "It looks smaller than I expected," Kirzay observed, pressing a 7-fingered hand against the glass. The alien had spent the 3-week journey studying Earth's history and culture, absorbing information with remarkable speed. Elias smiled. "Wait until you're on the ground. It's different when you're in the middle of it all." As the ship touched down on the landing pad, Elias could see the welcoming committee waiting for them, a mix of government officials, military personnel, and scientists. His stomach tightened with nervousness. He had spent the last 5 years on Mars, away from crowds and ceremonies, content to work with his tools and machines. Now he was returning as a hero, the mechanic who had helped save humanity. "Remember," he said to Kirzay, "they're going to ask a lot of questions. Some will be suspicious, others too eager. Just be patient with them." The alien's mental voice carried a hint of amusement. "I am a diplomat, Elias. Managing difficult conversations is what I was trained for." The airlock cycled open, and they stepped out onto Earth's soil. Elias returning home, Kirzay setting foot on a new world. The gravity was immediately noticeable, nearly 3 times stronger than Mars. Elias had been training in preparation, but Kirzay moved with visible effort, its slender frame struggling against Earth's pull. Ambassador Kirzay, Mr. Reeves, a tall woman in a formal uniform, stepped forward. "I'm Director Amara Chen of the Interstellar Relations Bureau. Welcome to Earth." The formalities were brief, thankfully. After a short public ceremony, they were escorted to a secure facility where the real work would begin. The United Earth Council had assembled a team of Earth's brightest minds, physicists, engineers, linguists, and strategists, to work with Kirzay on developing better defenses against the Scourge and establishing contact with the other alien species who had reached out. "The Scourge ships have retreated beyond Pluto's orbit," Admiral Yoshida explained during their first briefing. "We're tracking them with our most sensitive instruments, but they've made no aggressive moves since the encounter at Mars." "They're assessing," Kirzay explained. "The Scourge are methodical. They've never encountered resistance like what we provided. They'll analyze, adapt, and return with new strategies." "How long do we have?" asked Dr. Lakshmi Patel, Earth's leading expert on theoretical physics. 6 months, perhaps a year. They will gather more ships before attempting another incursion." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They had won a battle, not the war. "Then we have work to do," Elias said, breaking the tension. "We've proven that Nilari technology can be adapted to human systems. Now we need to scale up, not just here on Earth, but across the solar system." In the weeks that followed, Elias found himself in an unexpected role. No longer just a mechanic, he became the bridge between human engineers and alien technology. His practical experience with the gravity wave generator made him uniquely qualified to translate Kirzay's advanced theoretical knowledge into terms human engineers could understand and implement. They established a new research facility in the Himalayan mountains, remote enough for security, but with access to the massive power supplies needed for their experiments. Scientists and engineers from around the world came to work on what was now called the Interstellar Defense Initiative. 3 months after their arrival on Earth, the first breakthrough came. Dr. Patel's team, working with Kiriza and Elias, successfully created a stable miniature version of the gravity wave generator that could be powered by conventional fusion reactors. The key was understanding how the Nilari navigation core processed energy. Elias explained to the United Earth Council during a progress report. It's not just a conduit. It's more like a translator, converting raw power into specific gravitational frequencies. Can we mass-produce these devices? Asked Councillor Okafor, who represented the African Union. Kirizan answered, its mental voice now familiar enough to the council members that they no longer flinched at the strange sensation. With your current manufacturing capabilities, yes. The design we've created uses materials available on Earth. What we cannot replicate is the mental link my people use to focus the waves precisely. This had been their greatest challenge. Without a Nilari to guide the gravity waves, the defensive system would be far less effective. They had managed to create an algorithmic approximation, but it lacked the intuitive targeting that had made their defense of Mars successful. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sofia Rivera, a neuroscientist who had been studying Kurz's brain patterns, proposed an interface that would allow humans with specific neurological traits to establish a partial connection with the navigation cores. Not as deep as a Nilari connection, she cautioned, but enough to provide the intuitive guidance the system needs. Initial tests were promising. A small percentage of humans, roughly 1 in 1,000, showed the potential for the neural interface. Elias, to everyone's surprise, including his own, was among them. It feels strange, he admitted after his first session connected to the system. Like thinking in a new language. I can sense the gravity fields, direct them, but it's exhausting. With practice, it will become easier, Kirze assured him. My people train for years to master such connections. By the 6-month mark, Earth had established a network of gravity wave generators at strategic points around the planet and major orbital installations. Each was operated by a small team that included at least one neural interface operator. Individuals now referred to as navigators in a nod to ancient sailing traditions. Elias, much to his discomfort, had become something of a celebrity. The media had latched onto the story of the mechanic from Mars who had helped save humanity and was now pioneering a new form of human-alien technology integration. Children played with action figures of him and Kirza. Politicians sought his endorsement. Universities offer him honorary degrees. I just want to get back to work, he confided to Kirza one evening as they sat on the roof of the research facility, watching the sun set behind the Himalayan peaks. All this attention, it's not what I signed up for. Fame is often the price of significant achievement, the alien replied philosophically. But it will pass. Humans have short attention spans. Elias laughed. You've been studying us well. I have had an excellent teacher. The alien's mental voice carried warmth that had grown familiar over their months of working together. Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Patel, who burst onto the roof, tablet in hand, her face alight with excitement. We've got a response, she announced, from the Ardathi, one of the species that contacted us after the Mars incident. They're sending a diplomatic vessel, estimated arrival in 3 weeks. This was the news they had been waiting for. While defending against the scourge was crucial, establishing alliances with other spacefaring civilizations would be key to humanity's long-term survival and growth. They specifically requested to meet with both of you, Dr. Patel added, looking at Elias and Kirza. Apparently, word of your partnership has spread. The implications weren't lost on Elias. In saving Earth, he and Kirza had done more than repel an invasion. They had demonstrated that humans could work alongside alien species as equals, combining technologies and methods in ways neither could achieve alone. On the day the Ardathi ship arrived, Elias stood on the designated landing zone outside New Geneva, Kirza at his side. The alien vessel descended silently, a beautiful spiral structure that seemed to be made of living crystal. As its hatch opened and the first Ardathi emerged, tall, graceful beings with iridescent exoskeletons. Elias felt a profound sense of wonder. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked Kurza. "When you crashed on Mars, did you think it would lead to this moment?" "No," the alien admitted. "I hoped only to warn your people, perhaps save some before the inevitable. What we accomplished exceeded all my expectations." As the Ardathi delegation approached, Elias straightened his shoulders. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a representative of humanity, a builder of bridges between worlds. The tools he worked with had changed, but the fundamental principle remained the same: identifying problems, finding solutions, making connections that others might miss. The lead Ardathi raised a crystalline appendage in greeting. "We come in peace and fellowship." It communicated through some method that translated directly into understandable concepts in Elias's mind. "We have heard of the mechanic and the diplomat who defied the scourge. We wish to learn from your alliance." Elias stepped forward, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "We have much to learn from each other," he replied, "and much to build together." As the Ardathi tentatively touched its appendage to his hand, Elias felt a jolt of something. Not just physical contact, but a connection that transcended species barriers. In that moment, he understood what Kurza had meant about being more than just a mechanic. He was now part of something far greater, the beginning of a true interstellar community, founded not on conquest or fear, but on cooperation and mutual respect. The stars had aligned, bringing together beings from different worlds who discovered they shared the same fundamental hopes and fears. And there, on a landing pad outside New Geneva, with representatives of 3 species standing together beneath Earth's sky, a new chapter in the history of intelligent life had begun. Elias Reeves, once just a mechanic trying to keep solar panels working during Martian dust storms, now stood at the crossroads of cosmic history. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the return of the scourge, the complexities of interspecies diplomacy, the task of adapting alien technologies to human needs, he would face them the same way he had always approached problems, one connection at a time.